Today we'll be making these AirPods Max. Well, I've started my Patreon as well, so to get the project files and a bit more information than usual, feel free to join my Patreon and support the channel. So if it's your first time in Blender, it's simple to move around. I'll quickly run through some of the common things that I use. You can use your middle mouse button to rotate around and the same wheel up and down to zoom in and out. Right click for some menu, and what else? Well, you can move G to grab an object and move it around in a certain axis. You can press that axis, that is X, Y, Z. You can even give it a number to move it in a certain direction at a certain amount of time. Same applies to rotation for R. If you can just press R, you can rotate it around, give it an axis, and even give it an angle. Same case with the scale. You can give it an axis, you can give it a size on a certain angle. It's pretty simple. So that's one of the common things. You can also press Tab to go into an object and edit its vertices, faces, or edges, right? You can press the Z key to change the solid, rendered, or textured wireframe modes. That's all done. So let's start with today's work. So let's just drag and drop that AirPods Max reference image, and just going to rotate it down, set it up. We'll use Shift D to make another copy of it and use it on the side, so we can get a side view as well. Okay, now I'm just adding a torus and rotating it around. I'll just center it around with the ear pad, place it where it should be. Use the tab mode and wireframe to see better through it. So it's a good time to press tab and select some of these vertices. And if I just scale them down, you can see these vertices scaling down. But if I turn on the proportional editing, now it has its effect on the relevant relative vertices as well. And you can even reduce its impact by using the wheel mouse button, how much it is going to affect the neighboring vertices. This tool is very handy, so I'm going to be using this every now and then. Make one more copy of it, a duplicate by Shift D, because we're going to be needing it later on. And why not? Always keep making backups. I do that all the time with my project files. Now I am using Alt and clicking on the rings, which is helping me pick up these loops, face loops. And I'm deleting these faces, so I will pick up the right edge and see what I can do with it. I'll use E for extrude and S to scale down that extrusion, and then grab an X to move it along the X-axis. Then I'll apply the subdivision modifier to see how my surface is looking pretty neat, smooth, subdivided. You can keep turning it on and off to see the result of the effect of subdivision. And then I'm using again the extrude and scale to make one more surface out of it, and then moving it along the x-axis, this time on the negative side, so we can create that nice rounded bevel. Let's move it out. Now I'm picking up these faces and I will get rid of these. I'll pick up an edge and use the same extrude scale function to just keep making more of these loops inside, leaving a very small face in the middle, selecting that edge, pressing F to fill it up, and now we can move it out, but we'll turn on the proportional editing and then move it out. So we want to create a little bend, sort of bump on the end. If you notice this AirPods Max, it has a certain roundedness on its outside, so we want to create that roundedness. We can either use the bend tool, or we can use it just by proportional editing. We can create that little bend on the outer part of the surface. It's looking good now. If I turn on the matte cap You can see how the surface looks like applying different matte cap settings. We can see how smooth, shiny and clear the surface is. You can always reference these different settings to see how the surface is looking like. Okay, let's move that back in. I will be using these to create the inner part of the ear pads. That's why we made a copy of it. So add a subdivision to it. And I will select the inner part, select the outer part, Shift P and parent it. I'm just going to hide all of these things so we can work on the next part. That is going to be the band. Made a simple cylinder and just going to place it right there. Scale it down, position it roughly. We can move around the reference image as well as for need. So I'm going to pick up that edge and move it around, bring it somewhere on the top of that, and press Ctrl R to create some more ripple edges, loops. And we can move these edge loops around. Right. So you can scale these things down and move them around according to the need of whatever you're modeling. So I'm just following the same shape. What we will do is we'll take a couple of faces from its left side and extrude them out. You'll have to rotate them so they follow the same path, the way the band is going, and just position them more accurately. You might need to scale some vertices down here and there. So try to use both sides of the reference images. Next I'll add 2 edge loops by Ctrl R, and we can switch to wireframe mode and just adjust these vertices a little bit. Yeah, I think they're looking good now. So we'll just use the same extrude E shortcut and keep scaling and moving these new faces outside. So we've got this nice looking handle that's going towards the top. And if I select the normal and move this up, you can see this edge is not attached with the neighboring edge. So we've got multiple edges going on here. What we need to do is select this and press M and use distance to join these vertices together. So if I do the same operation now, pick up an edge and move it up, now you can see the neighboring edges are connected. So we don't have any duplicated edges. So I've just selected these edges and picked up normal, and I'm moving these edges up in their normal. So I want to give this whole a more rounded look. Yeah, you can work on this and make it as rounded as you like, but basically the whole point is to get it more rounded, so when we apply the subdivision surfaces it looks smooth and rounded. So all I've done now is picked up these right-sided faces and deleted them, picked up some of these edges and dissolved them, and now picked up these edges and just moved them so they are all together. It's a good time to apply a mirror, and we've got ourselves a surface that looks something like this. But there are some disconnections, so I'm going to sew them together. We have an option for that in mirror, but we've got a hole there, so we'll fill that up as well. So if we apply subdivision surfaces, it's looking pretty good. Let's fill this up, apply the mirror, and now pick up these edges and use the bridge edge loop to connect these. You can right click and use the bridge edge loop. Pick up these edges and press F to fill it up, and the same thing with these. And this is what we get. So now we need to select the edge loop and press F to fill it up, and we need one more edge close to it, and we can do that, or we can just use extrude to extrude the face out a little bit and then scale it outwards. I will extrude again bring this one down. We'll use a Control R to make an edge loop, and one more to make an edge loop to the top. So we've got more extended cylinder out. We use the same technique to make the neck later on. This time I'm pulling this one upwards with the same extrusion and scaling technique. Let's add a small cylinder and extend this out. Place it where it should be. A couple of adjustments. I'll pick up the bottom face, extrude it outwards, scale it down and rotate the faces. Follow the same technique this time. Now I'll add a subdivision surface and create two edge loops, one on the top, one at the bottom. So I've got some of these extra faces that I want to get rid of right at the end. So I'll delete this. Also I'll Alt click on this face loop and delete those loops. It's a good time to apply mirror again this time. On the y-axis, that's what we need. And I'll just seal these together. But we've got one copy on X as well, so let's disable that. If we apply subdivision surface, things are looking good. There'll be adjustments needed, so what we can do is we can always turn off the subdivision surface, click on the vertex here and there, and see where we want to adjust something. Now while working on this ear band, the one thing you need to keep in mind is when you're moving the vertices, make sure you've selected normal from the top. So the vertex is moving along its normal. I will be working on the ear cups later on as well, but I'm just doing that temporarily right now to just give it more sense. Once again, select all the objects, Shift D, duplicate, and move these ear pads around to just align them to the ear band. So now as you can see, I've moved everything towards the cursor, which is the world origin. I'll be making a simple plane here. Rotate it around, give it some subdivisions, a lot of them actually, some more. I'm going to add an empty and add that to the simple deforms. Set it to -0.1, +0.1. You can see now we've got that bend, and we'll be using this surface to make a cutout in the ear band, and that's exactly where we're going to be positioning our net. So this surface is going to help us make two things. One a cutout, and the other thing is going to be the net. So make a duplicate of it once you're happy with it. Now we'll subdivide it. As we've got this thing subdivided already, we'll press Tab and select these vertices that are right inside the band. Select invert and delete the rest of them. Also, let's get rid of these. We've got ourselves a net right inside. I'll pick up my ear band, apply a boolean to it, and select the net. This time we'll create, if we disable this, we can see a cutout right inside. The copy that we made also need to reference the empty, so yeah, we'll need this net to fix right inside. Let's just adjust the bend once again until it's completely inside that cutout. And we have applied a wireframe deformer, and this is what our mesh looks like. We've got some of that mesh coming out, so let's sort that out. You can always press Tab and select the vertices that are coming out and delete them. Pre-created is not very dense, but you can always make it more dense by just subdividing it further. There you go, that's what it looks like. I think it looks pretty good. So now what I'll do is inside edge loop, that's what I'm going to select and separate it. And I will be using that edge loop to create one more surface inside the earpad. This is going to give us the mesh net that we need inside the earpad, and just solidify it using the deformer. So we got it a bit more thickened this time. I'll add a remesh node to create a bit more dense mesh inside it. So using the same wireframe, we can create more mesh. Remember, you can always copy modifiers by selecting one surface to another. Shift L and you can copy the modifiers. I'll add the wireframe and probably use a subdivider once again, but move it above to create a more dense mesh. Same thing on the other one. And I'll use one more copy of it underneath to fill out the space, so it's not a see-through, as you can see this one. Now let's make this top part of the ear neck. Now we need to create a cutout inside the ear pad, so we can either use this sphere or we can use a cylinder to first make the hole. Later on, if you see in my video, I've adjusted this using the cylinder so I get a more neater cutout of the surface. So I'm using the same Boolean tool to create this cutout and delete these faces, use the edges. Once again, Alt, click on the edge to select the edge loop and extrude it inside. And then just position it roughly. Later on, as I mentioned, I used a cylinder to make a more cleaner cut and Boolean it with a simple cylinder that had a lot of subdivisions on it, so I get a more cleaner cut out of this. So now let's make a volume knob. This time I've used the cylinder, so I get a much more cleaner result. So I'm using just some references to match the size of the volume knob. And if you can see in that image, we've got some ridges on top of it as well. So what I'll do is I'll just set my cursor to this, make a torus right here, set up its minor and major radius. So I need a really thin torus. Part of it, in fact. So after carefully adjusting that, I'm going to delete some of the faces that we don't need. You only need 1/4 of it. And I will move both of these items to the world origin, where our cursor is placed, and I'm just going to scale this down. Hidden my cylinder. I just want to work on the endpoints of this, so I will extrude them, give them a face, one more edge loop. So we need a bit of roundedness on the edges of this. Let's add a subdiv, and you see this rounded, proper part of the torus. I'll scale it down, place it on the edge of it. So let's bring in an edge loop, Control R, make a few more of these, and I'll select the edges, and using proportional editing, I've got them all settled up. I can create more edge loops as and when needed. And I'm selecting the edge loops using Alt and scaling them out. Now we've got something like this. Now let's make more duplicates of it. So I'll set its origin to the 3D cursor. It's right in the center of the world. Add an empty. Let's call it empty ridges. Select that and apply an array modifier. And we'll pick up object offset and set empty as an offset object. If you go to an empty and rotate it, we can make more copies and change the number of copies by the array modifier. I'm just going to extend one more face in the center. And that's it. And now let's use Boolean to cut out these ridges. Select the torus. It's going to take a while. And this is what we get. Let's position the volume knob now where it belongs. Adjust that a little bit. Now, after adjusting the volume knob, I think it's a good time to make a Boolean and combine these two objects together. I'm going to make a button here in the same proportional editing. This is going to be our cutout button. We keep one more copy of it inside, which we are going to scale down and use on different other cutout parts wherever that's going to be needed in future. So I'm using the same shape, same object, multiple times, different locations, with different sizes to create that USB-C cutout at the bottom. And I'll be using this same shape later on to create those noise cancelling sensor areas. Now that we've created all the cutout pieces, let's just hide our backgrounds for a while. Select all of these, make a duplicate of this because both the ear pads have different cutouts. Like there is just one volume knob and there's just one button there, so the other one won't need that. So we'll just need to identify that, get rid of the ones that we don't need. And the next approach is just going to be simple. Add booleans, select the objects that you want to cut out, and keep a copy of it because you might need it in future. And this one was a USB-C cutout, so, or lightning, whichever one it is. I just moved it inside, reshape it, scaled it a bit. Yeah, I'm going to follow the same procedure for the following cutouts. Now for the button, I have used a copy of it after cutout, and I will get to an edge of it by using tab. I'll select an edge loop, use the bevel tool right here, just bevel off this edge and increase the divisions by using the mouse wheel. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's more rounded now. Shade smoother, it looks good. There's this cutout for the volume knob. Now let's preview everything with the matte cap. So now it's a good time to make an empty and position it roughly right on the top, make a duplicate of it, and select all the objects and shift click the empty to parent those objects to an empty. So now we can control everything with just one empty. Same thing with this one. I'll deselect it and then select it again. Let's rotate it around. We had a previous temporary copy, we can get rid of that. Move and adjust these ear pads. I made a mistake earlier where I made a cutout on the opposite end, so this time I'm just going to select this S, Y and -1 to mirror it in a negative way, so everything on the right side goes to the left side. This way you keep the same geometry, but it's just reflected. I'll just reposition the remaining elements, move them inside. So now what I've done is I've parented everything to the control AirPods empty and deleted all the remaining things that I didn't need it, just to clean up the space a little bit, hidden all the relationship lines, and extended one more frame. Now here I'm going to drag and drop my reference image again so we can material these things out. They're mainly just two materials. One is on the ear pad itself, which is the metallic green, and then there is the mesh material. So let's just work the first one out. Before that, I'll just pick up Cycles Renderer. It's going to take a while. And pick up GPU, set up the number of samples to around 20. Render region should be selected, and we'll just add an environment background. You can pick it up from Holy Haven, HDRI Haven, and this is what it looks like. Okay, let's give it a material. Pick up the color from the ear pads itself, that apple green. We can adjust, we can shift link the materials, so the materials are copied. We'll adjust the metallicness and the roughness of this. Play around with it unless you're satisfied. Increase the sample so I can see a bit more how the noise is working. So I will be adding a noise texture. Let's add a color ramp. Shift A to add the color ramp or any other node. And I'll just increase the contrast. I'll scale it up so we can create those very small little tiny minute dots. I'll press Ctrl T to add the mapping and texture coordinates and link it up with the object. So I'll now add colors to this, picking it up from the ear pad itself. Now you can connect the same colors to the roughness as well, that's your choice. So I'd suggest you spend some time playing around with the settings, see what works for you. Now in the same hyper shader, you can drop down the world menu. Here is our world, the environment that we've added before. Control T and rotate the world around so you can move around the environmental light. So I'm going to set the strength to 0 for a moment. Now add up my area lights. Scale it up. I will need one more copy to place at the bottom, so I'll just Shift D and rotate it around. Now let's add a material to this one. Connect that and use a checkered texture. Pick up the colors from the original reference. And adjust this pattern. We need to connect it with the UV. And now we can adjust the tiles. When you see them, they are properly proportional. I think that's looking good now. Yeah, we'll use the same and just use the vector part of it to connect with the displacement height. Connect that to the displacement, and now you've got some depth going on in the mesh. Looks more like a net now. So just copy the material and you can adjust that, give it a color if you want. Using the same technique of copying the materials to the inner mesh, let's call it a net mesh so we can reuse it if we want to. Probably need to use that again on those inner cutouts. So I'll press U to unwrap this face and add a new material to the existing one, and we will use this material to be assigned to the part of this ear pad. There we go. And I'll be using the same technique to the rest of the cutouts. Working on making this metallic knob. So throughout the project, lighting and rendering process, I keep refining my materials every time I revisit them. So now I'm making a simple material for the headband. Copy the material from the ear pad to these volume and button knobs. Now if I turn on my strength of the environment again, this is what it looks like. Let's lower it down. Select the net. Give it a simple material from the reference image. That looks good. Okay, now let's add a camera and align it to the view and shift tilde to move it around, or you can just go here and use the controls to move the camera so the headphones is right in the dead center. And we'll change the timeline. We'll go to the first frame of it and add a keyframe using I and I. Both our location and rotation are keyframed. We only need rotation for this one. And go to the end frame and plus 360 and press I so you can lock the keyframe. Now if you move, you've got a 360 spin. At this point I'll add another plane which I'm going to use as a background. It's going to be just simple plane, and I'll add diffuse color to it and move it back. And I'll add one more light to it, so I can just create a little gradient right behind it. You can change that point light to area light and rotate it so it just looks towards that back panel. Increase its intensity. That looks about right. And I'll select these part of the faces on our band and assign them to the group of vertex. Same thing, I'll select these faces, make a new vertex group, and assign it. Now if you select both of these groups, you can only select those vertex parts, faces in fact. And you can assign that material. Now the material is only going to be assigned to those parts. So if I turn on the rendering, you can see those parts become metallic. So let's try render this and increasing the sample size to around 3000, and the result is going to be on your screen. So if you've got any questions, any comments, if you want to join my Patreon, you're more than welcome. Just do that and show your support. Put your comments down, your questions down. I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible and enjoy the result of what we've created. So what should we be making next? Comment it down and I'll see you in the next video. Till then, Forest Tech signing out.